Alright, well, fundamentals of gas cutting and welding. Section 4, Safe Work Practices. Section describes safe practice developed with experience in using welding cutting equipment. Continuous research development field experience result in reliable equipment. Safe installation, operation, safe surfacing practice. Accidents occur proper because of the improper equipment use of the maintenance. Some of the practices are based on common sense, other make and technical volumes to explain the event of the rules should be followed. The work area. The work area must have fireproof floor or concrete. Best use the heat resistant shield to protect walls and unprotected floor from the sparking of hot material. Metal oxygen itself will not burn. However, the presence of pure oxygen will accelerate the combustion, cause materials to burn with great intensity. Use table and fireproof tops. Fire breaks will work well with the protect table and benches. Surface chain or otherwise secure cylinders to the wall, bench cart. Keep the areas between you and the cylinder valve unobstructed. Keep cylinders clear. Errors when they will be struck or knocked over. Post no smoking signs, warning sign in the area, hazards, fume accumulation, ventilation, make adequate ventilation to prevent accumulation of toxic fumes and gases. Refer to the NASI standard Z49-1. Working with a confined space only when work in a confined space only when it's being ventilated. When working in an air supplied respirator, do not use oxygen for ventilation. Protective clothing, wear protective clothing like gauntlet, gloves, hat, high safety toe shoes, belt, shoes. Shirt collar, protective flaps, button, wear cuffles, trousers to prevent entry of sparks and slag, hold metal and welding rounds, electrodes, strubs in workplace when should never be handled without gloves. Wear safety goggles, glasses, and the shields and side shields, appropriate filter, lenses, plates, and protected with a clear cover goggles. This is most weld cutting and the chipping to protect the eyes from radiant energy and flying with the metal. Replace the cover for glasses broken, pitted with the splattered, and for the eye protection, refer to the ANSI Z87-1. Do not wear oily or greasy clothing while welding or cutting. They are readily initiated with sparks. Wear protection when worked over the head and in confined space. A hard hat shouldn't be worn when others are worked overhead. Fire and explosions. Fire and explosions can occur with the equipment improperly installed, with prepared and used. But be aware of the flying spark of the flagging slag can pass through the cracks along with the pipes through the window doors and through the wall or floor openings out of sight with the goggle operated. Sparks and slag can fly 35 feet. Inspect oil oxy fuel apparatus for oil, grease, and the damaged parts. Do not use oxyacetylene apparatus for the oil, grease, and present with a damaged event. Never use oil and grease around the oxyacetylene apparatus. Keep the flames and heat sparks from the cylinder and hoses. Have fire extinguisher proper type with the size of a hand on the work area known where located in the shop. Open the oxygen valve all the way to seal the cylinder back to seal packing. Never test the leaks with flame or use soapy water. After work and complete, inspect an area with the possible fires and smoldering areas. Fuel leak detection. Joint hoses should be checked for leaks before welding and is attempted whistles. Acetylene may be detected distinctive smell, usually levels less than 2% of oxygen and is odorless. Leak detection is best care for the applying the week. Typically, have a 0.5% of solution of the detergent water leaking detection solution from one of the gas supplies companies is applied with the joint over the bottom of the brushes. Escaping the gas will form the bubbles. When occurring the leak, the area should be cleaned and remove the residual from the leak detection solution. Alright, using oxygen. Always refer to oxygen as the correct name as, say, oxygen, never air. It's very important that oxygen may not be confused with compressed air. It uses air and substitute compressed air. Oxygen is not flammable, but even materials that do not burn usually burn in oxygen. They burn slowly and air can ignite. They easily burn violently in an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Never use oxygen, ventilate the confined space. Use air, replace the atmospheric oxygen consumed with the welding and cutting. Oxygen enriched in greater than 23% or oxygen depleted at less than 19% atmosphere should be avoided. Never saturate clothes or oxygen. Clothing saturated with oxygen will be burned intensely and ignited. Grease oil bearings with materials, grease, gloves, rags, and other combustibles that can be readily ignited. Present oxygen must be kept for the oxygen equipment. Keep oxygens at least 20 feet from the fuel gas cylinder or other readily combustible materials, particularly grease or oil, or separated with a 5-foot non-combustible barrier. The high having a fire resistance rating at least half an hour. If liquid oxygen is used, cylinders must be transported and stored and used in an upright position to maintain gaseous state of the safety devices and prevent liquid from reaching regulator. Use acetylene gas. Refer to the fuel gas and correct name used such as acetylene, not gas. The other Other gases, natural gas, methane, and liquid petroleum gases, and propane and butane are different from the acetylene from each other in the heat. Untamed flammability limits safe handling requirements, therefore, be specifically refer to any of the gas. Acetylene cylinders must be transported to the stored in the upright position. Avoid discharge of the acetylene gas during use. The Compressed Gas Association 5333113 or G1 calls for the withdrawal of the rate not exceeding 1/10 of the capacity of the cylinder per hour during the intended use. The full withdrawal of the content cylinder with the continuous basic flow rate shall be no more than 1/15 of the capacity of the cylinder per hour. Cylinder valve immediately closes the valve of the fuel gas cylinder. If the valve leaks, immediately remove the cylinder outdoors away from the possible source of ignition, not cylinder supplies at once. Acetylene cylinder's wrench should be left on the open cylinder valve to remove after closing the valve. Use only an improved wrench available for cylinder supplier. Your pressure regulators. Never withdraw the gas from the cylinder pipeline except when through an improved pressure reducing regulator. Regulator relief valve designed to protect the regulator from the overpressure of the intended to protect the downstream equipment. Provided such protection with one or more relief device. Never connect a regulator to the cylinder containing gas other than from which the regulator was designed. Remove the regulator from the cylinder transported with unsecured with the cart not on design for such a purpose. The following system indicate that faulty regulator leaks as gas leaks internally, excessive creep, regulatory delivery pressure continue to rise with the downstream valve closed. Faulty gauge. If the gauge pointer does not move off the stop pin when pressure is not pressurized, not return to the stop pin after pressure release. Alright, cylinders. Cylinders must be handled carefully to prevent leaks and damage with the walls of the valve. Safe devices avoid electrical circuit contact with the cylinders, including third rail electrical wires. Welding circuit they can be produced without the damage of the cylinder wall, causing possible serious endangerment, accident, or never strike an arc on a cylinder. Identify gas content using only one cylinder with the name of the gas marked on them. Do not rely on the color of the cylinder. Identify the contents. Notify the supplier if the content in the cylinder is not identified. Never deface or alter the name or other markings on the cylinder is illegal and hazardous. Never use the cylinder contents or other than intended use. Never use a support roller or clothes rack. Support roller or clothes rack. Secure with the following. Always chain the secure cylinder upright in the regulator and the hose is connected to. Transport cylinder with a crane using secure support with a platform cradle designed for purpose. Do not lift cylinders off the ground by their valves or the caps by chains or slings or magnets. Do not expose cylinders to excessive heat, spark, slag, flame, etc. that may cause rupture. Do not allow continents to exceed 130 degrees. Protective cylinders, particular valve, the bumps and falls of falling objects and whether keep the caps securely tightened over the cylinder, not use the being moved. Struck valve, do not use the hammer and metal wrenches, especially special key acetylene open cylinder valves that cannot be opened by hand. Do notify your supplier. Cylinder filling should not be modified, used or other than the intended purpose. Torch. Examine the seating of the surface of the torch connection before use for the ear of the worn or damaged parts should be replaced. Do not attempt to repair the torches or regulators. If fault, send the repair the manufacturer's designated repair center where special techniques and tools and tests are used to train personnel. Torture is not a hammer. Never use it in chip slags. Stitch misuse the dish torch of the torch of the create that has the appropriate tool for the job. Torch tip the cleaning should be done only with a specifically designed cleanup tip of the orifice to avoid enlarging and damaging existing holes. Alright, your hoses. Never use a hose other than the designed specified gas. General hoses identified reels of red for fuel gas and a green for oxygen, black for inert gas. The RMA CGA grade T hose for the fuel gases, including acetylene to prevent hose failures, grade R and R&M for use of acetylene only. Where ferrules, clamps designed for the hose, no ordinary wire or other substitute connecting hose to fittings. Use only the standard brass fittings to splice the hose. No copper tubing splices. Avoid long runs to prevent kinks and abuse. Suspend hose of ground and protect that from damage of the vehicle, sparks, slag, or open fuels. Examine hose regular leaks, wears, and loose connections. Immerse the pressurized hose in bubble indicates leaks. Repair leak or worn hose, cutting of the other damage in the area, and splicing. Do not use tape. Proper connections. A clean cylinder valve with the outlets impurities. It may clog orifices, damage seats, and before connecting regulators. When matching a regulator cylinder before connecting, be sure the regulator label cylinders marking agree the regulator inlet and cylinder outlet connections are properly intended surfaces. Do not use pipe compound, lubricant tighten. Do not use the force connection. In connection leaks, close the cylinder valve depression. Pressurize the line. Disassemble the cleaning of the retightening of the valve for metal to metal. Seating, use the correctable wrench. Avoid the supplier for O-ring connections. Hard tighten. Avoid adapters being between cylinder and regulator. If unavoidable, use CGR, CJ adapter. Avoid the use for the supplier. Use 2 wrenches in the type of adapter with both right and left hand threads. A regulator outlet or hose connection may be identified by the right-hand threads for oxygen, left-hand threads for grooved and hexed out, and nuts and shaken on the fuel gases. Safety, operation, and use. The silicane is unstable in pressure above 15 psi. Never use the silicane or any other fuel gas to confine whether it may cause the fire explosion. Do not open a silicane cylinder valve more than 1 turn. This permits adequate flow of the silicane from the cylinder. Allows you to quickly close the valve in an emergency situation. To open and close a silicane cylinder valve that are not provided with the hand wheels, allow the special wrench. Keep them provided with the supplier. Leave the wrench in the key position. Remove the immediate use for the necessary to close the valve properly when the several cylinders are manifolded together. A wrench on every cylinder is not required. More than 1/10 of the capacity of the cylinder should not be used per hour. This causes the silicane rapidly can't come out of the solution like carbon dioxide bubbles violently, fizzing with the fizzing of soft drink that has been shaken. Oxygen cylinder contains a pressure of 2,000 psi and must be handled carefully. Impure oxygen will accelerate combustion to the point in which the cause of the explosion. Do not use oxygen to dust off clothing or work area. Use the correct size wrench when tightening and loosening fittings. They are made for the brass and can be damaged easily. When not used, cylinders must be protected with caps installed. Never use a cylinder that is leaking air or leakage around the cylinder valve stem is detected with the valve and has been opened 1 and 1/2 turns for an oscillating cylinder. As far as possible, the oxygen cylinder closes the valve tightly and return it to your supplier and tagging the cylinder to let him the valve is unserviceable. Stand to the side of the equipment when opening the cylinder valves. Open them slowly. This will limit the risk of the injury due to exploding regulators. Only use a friction lighter to light the torch. Hot metal left out should be marked as hot so others will not burn by it. Use pliers or tongs to grab the hot metal. Do not weld or cut on closed container. Inspect the hose frequently when necessary, replacing them. Always keep oxygen and silicane cylinders vertically up at all times. Do not store the horizontal position as silicane cylinders are used. Horizontal position solvent may be lost or flame quick. Quality may be affected. Store oxygen cylinders separated with the fuel gas cylinders unless the fire-resistant non-compatible portion at least 5 feet as used in separating the 2 types of cylinders, and a minimum of 20 feet separation should be maintained. Oil, grease, coal, dust, and similar organic materials are easily ignited, burned, or violently present with the highest oxygen concentration. Never allow such materials to come in contact with oxygen. Oxyacetylene equipment, including hose, oxyacetylene apparatus, does not require lubrication. Do not use pipe fitting compound thread lubricants to make connections. Connections to oxyacetylene and oxy-fuel gas is equipped with a design so that they may be tight without need of lubricants or sealants. Of the special importance need to keep the oil materials containing the oil, grease, and away from the equipment for the oxygen. Alright, lighting the torch. Purging lines before lighting to remove the air and all the contaminants of the hose. Open each of the torch valve to turn long enough for the pure gas to purge out with any of the gas mixtures. Shut one of the valves before opening the other. Do not purge in a confined space. The present flame the other source ignition toward people. Point tip away from yourself and others when using the torch. Spark the lighter and apply the light of the torch. Do not use the matches or cigarette lighter or hand burns as well may result. Light as it fouls. Open the fuel valve with ignition for gases following the tip and adjust the fuel valve with the full flow without blowing off the adjusting oxygen valve with the desired flame. Or extinguishing a flame. Close oxygen without delay with the fuel torch valve tightly. Check the gas leak for the tip of the valve. Leave the torch in a safe position. Prevent accident dislodging that may open the valves and cause damage. Leave equipment unattended lunch or overnight. Leave equipment unattended lunch or overnight. Extinguish the flame by closing the torch valve. Close the cylinder valves. Leave equipment unattended over the weekend or longer. Extinguish flames or closing torch valves. Close cylinder valves. Drain gas with regulators. Open the torch valve, venting the gas in safe direction, and closing the valve one at a time in public area to disconnect the stored equipment to prevent unauthorized accident which causes create the hazardous purge lines before lighting or reusing. Backfires or black flashbacks. A backfire is a loud noise produced by the explosion of the gas cutting of the welding, usually following the minor flashback of the flame. Extinguishment or reignition of the tip. The repeated backfire can cause the tip to overheat, eventually cause a sustained flashback, and causing bring tip to close the work to bringing tip or causes or bringing tip too close to the work and touching it. Foreign materials entering the tip, impeding the gas flow over tip, heated tip, such as causing the work in a corners tight operation incorrect with too low of the gas flow. Backfire remedy. If your torch does not stay lit, close the oxygen gas and the fuel gas valve in that order. Relight the fuel gas with a spark lighter only if stable. It is not obtained by adding oxygen. Closing the torch valves. Check the tip cleanliness and regulator setting in the purging relight. Flashbacks and its causes. Flashbacks burn back of the flame into the tip through the torch. It is also called sustained burning into the tip of the torch. A flashback can cause by faulty misused equipment. If it does not cause the fire or hose rupture, then it may produce a hissing or squealing sound due to the burning inside the torch tip, usually at a mixture. Example of faulty misused equipment are failure to purge incorrect pressure, distorted loose tips or adapter seals, kink hoses, closed tip, the torch orifices, overheated tip or torches. To stop flashback, do not touch any of the parts of the tip of the mixture extension that may be hot. When squealing, a sound is heard, the internal combustion must be extinguished immediately, shutting off the torch of the fuel gas and the oxygen valves in that order. Wait a moment until no squealing is heard on reopening the fuel gas valve with the relight. When squealing is not heard, the flashback is indicated with the flow of the hot gas. The tip of the flame is inside of the torch. Immediately shut off the cylinder valves. Wait after 5 minutes if the torch, regulator, or the cylinder are cool to disconnect the equipment. Inspect the torch and regulator and the inner damage. Alright, chemical exposure. Less obvious hazards with welding. Exposure to harmful chemicals. The exposure to certain metal oxides, carbon monoxide can often lead to several medical conditions. Damaged chemicals can produce from the fuel from the workpiece, from the protective coating of on the workpiece. Lead, cadmium, zinc, mercury, barium, bearings, similar materials of the welding can be produced from harmful conditions with the toxic fumes, and long-term exposure to the barium may result in shortness of the breath, chronic coughing, significant weight loss, accompanied with fatigue and general weakness. Adequate local exhaust ventilation must be used. Each person is an area you will use. The operator must wear an air supplied respirator for barium must be used. Other alloying elements such as arsenic, magnesium, silver, and aluminum can cause sickness to those who are exposed. Metals coated with containing materials like eminent toxic fumes should not be heated unless the coating is removed from the work surface. The work area was well ventilated. The operator wears the air-supplied respirator. More common, the anti-rust coating on the most manufactured metal coating components, zinc, codium, fluorides, and other often protecting irons, steels, and oxide from oxidation. Galvanized metals have a heavy zinc coating. Exposure to the zinc oxide fumes can lead to sickness named metal fume fever. The condition rarely lasts longer than 24 hours, but is still unpleasant. Vapors by chlorinated solvents can be decomposed with the flame of the heating from the phosphagen, a highly toxic gas. Other long irritation products, the ultraviolet radiant energy of the arc can decompose the trichloroethanol or pyracloethanol. Other than chlorinated solvent vapors of the phosphagen do not weld to cut, where solvent vapors can draw during welding, cutting. Automatic atmosphere, where radiant energy can penetrate the atmosphere containing heavy minute amounts of solvent vapors. Data from the Occupational Safety Health Administration. Additional information regarding the welding and cutting of safe practices can be found with the standard patent lists for the ANSI, NFPA, Standard F1, WSCGA, National Electric Code, Occupational Safe Health Administration, Local Industrial Code is provided with the manufacturer requirements and equipment installation, use of service study. Case study. The case is presented with the people that facilitate welding and cutting similar process that provided information with the fire explosion hazards, acetylene cylinder explosion. An operating well was lighting the oxyacetylene cutting torch. There was a flashback to the acetylene cylinder, which started to vibrate. 3 minutes later, the cylinder exploded. The cylinder split into two parts. The largest part shot through the window and traveled 23 meters before the embedding itself in the embankment of the factory boundary. When the workshop was badly damaged, the window was blown out and the roof had collapsed. The explosion lifted the roof of the main factory building, which had been replaced. The cost of the damage was over $1 million. Fortunately, no one was injured because the operator realized the cylinder was in a dangerous condition. He raised his alarm and the factory was immediately evacuated. What went wrong? The operator did not fully appreciate the hazard of facilitating. He did not follow the recommendation procedure for taking the adequate precautions. In particular, the correct lighting of the procedure was not followed. The gas hoses were not purged. The acetylene gas was not used as correct pressure. The gas cylinders were not protected with the flashback arrestor. Flashback can occur with a flame mixture with the fuel gas and oxygen. With the hose with the torch did not stop the flame igniting with the mixture, and with the travel backwards from the torch along with the hose through the regulator into the gas cylinder. The flashback triggered the decomposition acetylene with the fuel hose and the regulator and cylinder itself. Hazardous acetylene cylinders. The number of the incidents in each year of the flashback and acetylene cylinders triggered the decomposition, leaving the cylinder in dangerous, unstable condition. An explosion of the cylinder only 3 minutes after the flashback is extremely rare. In most cases, the decomposition identified with the early stages. There's a time of the building and then being evacuated. Fire brigade was called for the emergency action to be taken. To make an unstable cylinder, the fire brigade may have they apply with cool water for many hours to conserve. It would be several days before the cylinder could be moved, and before moving the cylinder could be restart the accelerator decomposition. The incident put into the risk in the vicinity of the cylinder anyone who tries to make the cylinder safe, such as the emergency services. Our acetylene cylinders can be used safely. Cylinders have different design most often than other gas cylinders. It consists of a steel shell containing porous mass. The porous mass is a cellular structure when it's completely filled with gas. Acetylene gas cylinders dissolve in the acetylene absorbed with the porous mass. Decomposition. Acetylene is usually triggered with a heated. For example, the cylinders involved with the fire torch, with the flame, with the blowtorch involved with the flashback. The porous mass is designed to slow down the driftful of any of the decomposition of the gas from the starting of the decomposition cylinder. Exploding should be take several hours. This will usually, but not always, provide time for the emergency action. Decomposition can be triggered more easily and can be produced rapidly if the porous masses be damaged. Repeated flashbacks, mishandling of the dropping of the cylinder. To the cylinder valve of leaking gas, open the leakage valve, increasing the rate of the decomposition. And within the cylinder, acetylene hoses above the pressure recommended with the supplier for the most welding of the cutting process. The acetylene pressure should not exceed 9 psi. What can you do to prevent flashbacks? Training. Do not use oxyacetylene equipment unless you have been trained. Use correct lighting of the procedure. Lighting of the blowpipe, the purge of the hose, the opening of the gas supply to each of the hose in a few seconds to flush out the flammable mixture gas in the hose. Purge one hose at a time. Close the blowpipe, the valve, after purging using a well-ventilated area. Maintain non-return valves. Filling the non-return valves, often check the valves on the torch to prevent the backfeeding of the gas into the flow. Hoses. Inspect the regulator. Replace damaged non-return valves. Non-return valves will stop the flashback once it has occurred. Keep nozzles in condition. Poorly maintained nozzles can be terminal gas flow, which increases the risk of the flashback. Inspect the nozzle regulator. Make sure that they are not blocked or the dirt or spatter. Replace the damaged nozzles. Not hold the nozzle too close to the workplace. The nozzle can overheat and cause a flashback. If the flashback does occur, immediately close the cylinder valves, both acetylene and oxygen. If the same is safe to do so, the flame should go out of the fuel gas acetylene and shut it off. The flames cannot be put on once they have excavated, and call the emergency fire service of the gas supplier. Check an acetylene cylinder which has been involved with the flashback, which may have the effect to fire the flames to become warmer or start to vibrate. Excavated the building, immediately call the emergency fire service. Also call the gas supplier. Do not attempt to move the unstable cylinder. Direct water spray at the cylinder body. It is safe to do so. Before using again the flashback, the rest of the other components which may be damaged with the flashback, replace the necessary if doubtable and consult the supplier. Backfire and flashback procedures. After an unsustained backfire in which the flame is extinguished, close the blowpipe with the control valve. Fuel gas first. Check the nozzle tight. Check the pressure for the regulators. Relight the torch using a recommended procedure. If the flame continues to burn, close the oxygen of the torch. Prevent the internal burning. Close the acetylene valve of the torch. Close the cylinder valves and gas supply and points isolation. Both oxygen and acetylene. Close the outlet adjustable pressure regulators, binding and the pressure adjustment screws. On both the torch valve to prevent pressure and the equipment. Close the torch valve. Check the nozzle tightness pressure for the regulators. Relight the torch using recommended procedures. If the flashback occurs in the hose equipment, the fire and the hose regulator connection gas outlet outputs, isolate the oxygen fuel gas supply cylinder valve with the gas supply outlet points only if this can be done safely. If no risk of the personal injury, control the fire of the first aid firefighting equipment. If fire cannot be put out at once, call emergency services after the equipment has cooled. Examine the equipment and replace the defective components. When the backfire has been investigated, the fault rectified with the torch may be relit with the flashback becomes the flame extended with the regulator. It is essential not only to examine the torch, but the hose and components must be checked, and if necessary to replace the flashback arrestor should be checked. According to the manufacturer instruction, with some of the design necessary to replace the fitting of the flashback arrestor is not substitute, but the working practice is always read and understand the safe practice. Attempting to install the operated surface equipment comply with the accessible practice of particular equipment used in the instruction manuals, personal safety, the safety of others. Failure to observe these practices may cause the injury, serious injury to death. Habitual safety promotes conditional equipment in use. Alright, terminology. We're going to skip this. We have read the whole document, so there's pretty much nothing that has been left unsaid.